begins today.
And we need to march on the Capitol today.
Let's have trial by combat. Let's walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. God bless you, and God bless America.
We're debating a step that has never been taken in American history. Whether Congress should overrule the voters and overturn a presidential election.
Being evacuated, being asked to put on masks, checking the door to make sure it's locked. Shots are being fired inside the Capitol chamber.
Can you show us your hand?
Yeah.
How did you get that on your hand?
Well, we had stormed into the chambers inside, and there was a young lady who rushed through the windows. A number of police and Secret Service were saying, get back, get down, get out of the way. She didn't heed the call, and as we kind of raced up to grab people and pull them back, they shot her in the neck.
Today is January 27th, 2021. I am Uncommon Sense, and welcome to the Black Man's Book Club.
Hey, everybody. Glad you made it.
That magnanimous voice that you're hearing there is Mr. D. Welcome, Mr. D.
Hey, thank you, man. Thank you, everybody. Hope everybody made it through well. And, you know what you got to do.
Right. And 2020 is over, right?
Yeah.
Everything's fixed now.
Right?
Everything's fixed.
Everything?
So, before we get into the drama that is the first month of the new year, let's do a feel good. Mr. D, do you have a feel good for me?
Quite a few, actually. Because it comes from prayer, But I tell you what, I'll tell you about something that happened to me on the way here. As I'm driving down the street, picture it's dark, it's clouds in the sky in this sunny Southern California, and a lot of the stores are blacked out, some because they closed, but some because they're running out of business.
Right.
But here's a bright light coming through the windows. There's a brother sitting in here at a table, and he has some computers on his table. And I said, well, that's new. So then a light pops up. It says something like computer repair. I said, oh, man, let me go find out about this brother. And I made a U-turn, came back around and parked. I tapped on the window with my key. Yeah, come on in, bro. And I said, you new, right? He says, yeah, I have been here for about maybe a month or so. Okay. So you fix computers? Yeah, I do. And we started talking. By the time we finished talking, I was like understanding that I could bring some of my older computers. I got like 2 or 3 desktops.
Mm-hmm.
I have about 7 laptops, and I have all kinds of stuff on them. Some of them, the systems have gotten so old, that they're not working quite right, And I ended up saying, well, give me your card, and I'll come by and see him. So here's my point. Here's my good feel. Notice I said good feel.
Right.
Right? Okay, because I got another piece to this, too. Here's a black man just starting up a business. He's got some expertise. He's got some skills. Well, I'm going to try him out. I told him that I could go to one of the big box stores and get it, fixed. But I'd rather come to him, and, maybe I'll be one of his first handful of customers.
Right.
But here's the feel-good story. Because one of the other things that happened to me is that as I was watching Moana and Frozen and Princess and the Frog, and because my little granddaughter is watching all this stuff, I'm learning the stories, I'm singing the songs, I'm dancing with her and stuff, That's a feel-good story within itself. But as she fell asleep, and then I turned to other things that I'm interested in, things I'm studying, I come across a program called One Strange Rock.
I love Run Strange Rock.
You know about it?
Is that the one with Will Smith narrating?
Yeah.
Yes, that's very good.
Very, down-to-earth, streetsy kind of vibe to it. But the thing that's important, and the thing I'm trying to get to, is that they had about 7 to 8 astronauts, of which 2 were black.
Oh.
There was a black woman. Notice I said that first, in homage to my granddaughter, because when she woke up, I saved it. I went back to see. That's a lady that went in space. Her name is I think it is Mae Jemison. I believe it is. Right? Yeah, and there was a black guy too. And they were among the 7 or 8 astronauts who were talking about how their time up in space, going around on the International Space Station, had given them the great, which they say was a privilege, to see the Earth, in a way that was quite different from what we would see since we're here.
Right.
You see, and they make a lot of interesting points. We can get real, nerdy about it, but I think folks ought to listen to it, because as we begin to recognize, here were 2 black people that had the expertise, the skill, the expertise, engineering, scientific, aeronautics and stuff, right. They're like what you might call in the top of their class, and they had to go through a lot of hell in order to be able to get there,
right, and
be recognized amongst the thousands and thousands and thousands of other people that were trying to get there, and we got 2 black people. So let me kind of pull all this good feel story together. Here's this brother with an expertise in computers, something that I need. And here these people that traveling in space, right. They all black folks. And what I'd like to posit to everybody out there is that we all got skills. We all got talents. And I just don't mean, singing and dancing and playing sports and stuff like that. We got scientists and we got doctors and we got lawyers, and as that book, The Destruction of Black Civilization, suggested, we got, government representatives and I think we can all agree that we got presidents and stuff, So we have all of these people that are doing things. Now, if you, the skill is the thing where you learn something. The talent is something that you just do naturally. That's about as simple as I can make it. So if you don't have a talent, you can easily get a skill by picking up a, what's the word? Book. That's like BOOK, read it, learn it, and then share it. And within our community, we can find ways to be able to make the thing happen. If we can't buy from each other, we can trade from each other. And that means that we can sidestep, this travesty of humility, this travesty of humbleness. These folks are busy trying to tear the system apart because it didn't go the way they wanted to go. Now all of a sudden it's suspicious, and it's illegal, and it's fraud, and it's this and it's that. They playing that process game. But we got another game coming to us, and that is that we know how to survive it no matter what. And I think that's a feel-good story.
I agree. And so it feels like what you're trying to advocate is to support black business.
It can't be said any simpler than that.
I'm glad that we landed on that, because that is the perfect segue into what I want to recognize. I want to recognize a new black business called Chicken and Chips. Chicken and Chips is disgustingly, amazingly good.
I heard you say disgustingly.
Disgustingly, amazingly good.
That must mean it's really good. Huh?
Oh my God. So I stopped by this place the other day, right? Well, I have this thing I do. I like to Google different black-owned restaurants in the area that I happen to be in, wherever it is. And I happen to be in some godforsaken area of LA off of Fletcher Drive. And we stopped at this place, and they don't. It's a chicken restaurant, but they don't do fried chicken sandwiches. They do everything. All they sell is rotisserie chicken. And if you've never had rotisserie chicken, you need to stop and get some, or buy a rotisserie, because rotisserie chicken is some of the best chicken out there. I don't really care how much you like fried. For rotisserie is kind of where it's at, and
less grease, still soul bird, huh?
Oh my God! And the sandwich that I had there was a truffle chicken sandwich with chicken, truffle aioli, lettuce, tomatoes, red onions, and it was all on the brioche buns.
You mean to tell me it wasn't, like, them cold bologna, mayonnaise, and bread sandwiches that grandma used to make?
No. Straight up gourmet sandwich and the piece of chicken that was on it. I mean, talk about that chicken. If that was a chicken breast, that chicken must have been the size of a turkey.
Uh-oh.
Golly. But
it was a turkey breast. Huh?
That's my black business shout out for the day.
That's beautiful.
You happen to be in LA and you're on Fletcher Drive, check out Chicken and Chips, brand new black owned restaurant.
And they need your support.
Yes, they do. And so I have a feel good story. So there's a store that I stop at pretty often, and it's not black owned, but most of the employees there are black, and so they know me for being that the guy with the Black History facts.
I knew it.
Right?
I knew it.
So every time I go in there, I kind of tell a different fact, different random thing that I'm pretty sure that nobody's in there has ever heard of, and at this point. That's kind of the relationship I have with these people. Like, they expect me to say something when I walk in there, and if I don't, then they look at me sideways. Right?
Yeah, like, did you know? Did you know about?
So
good for you, man.
I walk in there, and this guy, the guy that works there, I look at him and say, "Hey, man, I got something for you." And he looks at me and says, "I know you did. What you got? What you got?" And so I asked him, "Have you ever heard the name Leif Erikson?" And well, first, have you heard the name Leif Erikson?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So that's the same thing he said. Now, I'm not surprised to hear you say it. However, I was surprised to hear him say it. And then he told me that he found out about Leif Erikson only about a week ago.
Oh, okay.
And it was because I got him interested in reading. And so he's been doing a lot of reading lately.
Reading.
Right.
Learning
and
skills.
That was that felt so good to see that
you've impacted him enough to motivate him.
Yeah, garner some curiosity about the world.
Yeah. So that's good.
I thought that was interesting and awesome.
And that's what we all can do. We would ask those that are listening to do exactly that. You know something, teach something.
Right.
Share it. Discuss it, talk about it.
Well, I wrote 2 notes about your feel good story. I just wanted to share them because I think that you and I have something in common.
Okay.
Because you're helping to raise your granddaughter.
Okay.
And so you said something that I thought was touching, where you said you find sources.
Oh, yeah.
You find role models.
Yes.
Black role models for your granddaughter to look up to.
Even in the cartoons, man.
Right, exactly. And I'm the exact same way for my daughters. I'm constantly finding new people for them to look up to.
And Sesame Street too, by the way.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, let's not forget that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that you said is that these astronauts that go up into space, they get a different perspective of the world. And I completely understand that.
For sure.
100%. Just because of my job. And that's one of the things I tell people is when you get up in the tower crane and you get up, 1,200 feet off the ground and you're looking down, you get a real idea of how small you really are. Mm-hmm. You don't really notice it that often when especially if you live in the city, because you're constantly around buildings and things that are objecting your view of how big the world is. Mm-hmm. So to you, your world is only as small as your city block because you can't see over those houses.
That's a good point.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So when you get up and you're looking down at the ground and you realize that I can take a picture of the freeway from this high up and I have 40,000 people in this one picture.
Yes.
All jammed up in traffic.
I can see that.
You see what I'm saying? And it really gives you an idea of how small you are.
Wow.
It's just my observation.
Hey, can you imagine what it would be like when, you said 1,200 feet?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think they said that the International Space Station is 300 miles up.
Something like that.
Yeah. And so they, see the whole half of the planet.
Yeah.
I think they said they're going around the planet. One day for them is 90
minutes.
Yeah, 60 something, 70, 80 minutes.
I thought it was 90 minutes.
Yeah, maybe it's 90 minutes. From sunrise to sunset is no, I think 90 minutes is all the way around.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the sun rises every 9.5 minutes or something like that.
Something like that.
Something crazy. I know they're moving like 17,000 miles an hour in orbit.
They mentioned that. Yeah, they said a lot of stuff.
And you can see them with your naked eye. I watch them. I watch them in my telescope from my front yard all the time.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing, and that's a way to change your perspective, on the world, like you mentioned that you do when you get up in the tower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so those were my notes about your feel good story. So now let's move on to something that does not feel good.
Well, you know what? Before we do, maybe I should mention that I'm looking at one book called Dream Big, Little One, A Little Legends, Exceptional Men in Black History, and Exceptional Leaders in, Exceptional Women in Black History.
Oh, I have that book.
Yeah. I read that to my daughter when she lets me. She thinks she can read now.
Oh, man. Whether I want to get up and say the words.
Yeah. The Colorful Adventures of Zoe and Star. And there's about 20 other books right here where we are right now. Like, the books are looking at us. Oh, the Baby Please, Baby Please. Please, Baby Please. Yeah, we read that one to her. I keep telling my daughter that she needs to come here. And probably what I need is just buy some, But the idea is that you start them off with the joy of the story, see, because we are those kind of people,
right?
And even if you can't read it word for word because, you can't pick the words up off the page fast enough, then make up your own story.
Right.
It don't matter,
right.
But use the words in the book in order to be able to get the child to hear those words, and that will increase their vocabulary. And when you explain it to them in real English, not baby talk, they begin to talk, and they pick up the book and they want to read. And
it's reading that helps them speak clearly.
It's one of the forms of recorded knowledge that we have. The digital thing is cool. The TV and, all of that is cool. But the thing about reading is that you got to go for it. You got to push for it. You know, you have to do something in order to get it. It's not like it's just passive, like it's hitting you.
I agree.
And I think that opens up different centers in the mind.
I agree 100%. All right. I'm going to ask you a question.
Me? A question?
I have a question for you. And it's based off of an observation that I've made in recent memory. So the question that I have is I'm crazy because
yes.
Oh, thank you.
And we both are.
I am. I genuinely am. But is it me or does it seem like the media isn't properly expressing the escalation in white supremacy violence?
Well, the media is the question. In fact, when I think the media, it's like the media. You're like, who is that? What is that? Do we have our own media? What media? What do you decide is your own media? Is the question. And I would dare say that, without making it into a real long story, we need to have all of our listeners tell everyone that they can speak of that maybe one of the best ways to be able to get a fuller story, not the full story, but a fuller story, is to go to multiple sources. Now, there's lots of different social media you can go to. Some of it's good, some of it's not. Some of it's true, some of it's not. There's a lot of broadcast media, like the mainstream media, like on channel 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, that kind of stuff. You got CNN, NBC, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, as much as I'd rather not say it, but I think it's important because it gives you a handle, because when you hear people saying the same things that they heard on Fox, you kind of get an idea that, that's where they got that from.
Right.
But now you got ammunition to shoot. Well, you got ammunition to shoot at them. Not in the way that you want to destroy them, but just like, have you ever thought of blah, 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 blah?
Right.
You see what I mean? And you also have a shield to, so like when they say something, you have something that you can say back to them, which will help to hopefully get them to question the false narratives that they got. So here's my point. A long time ago, I remember seeing something called a ticker tape, and it was really a piece of tape. It was a paper piece of tape. It was about maybe half-inch wide, and there was like a machine, like a typewriter. It was inside this big glass, enclosure, and I think it was in the lobby on the corner, or maybe it was like 42nd Street and somewhere in New York, or maybe it's a block up or down, and I was absolutely amazed because it was constantly running. Mm-hmm. It ran all the time, day and night.
Does that have anything to do with the term the ticker tape parade?
Yes, because all of the tapes that they had gotten, after they used them for whatever, they would basically cut them up and they would use them like confetti, and it would go out. It would go out in the street during the parades. Yes. Yeah. And because many different reporters and journalists and others were using that. It's kind of like an outgrowth of the Telegraph. Press? Well, Associated Press used to use that type of technology, and then it became digital. It's similar to what you see on the bottom of some of the newscastings. When they're talking about one thing, they have other things scrolling along the bottom. Yeah,
the information that scrolls at the bottom tells you the sports, and tells you all what are the scores for all the sports, and then the relevant information outside of the story that they're focused on.
Yes, the sports, true. Other miscellaneous things, true. But there's other news besides the specific news story that they're talking about.
Right.
You see, so sometimes, and they'll repeat it. Right. So like, you might watch it one time and you might listen to the story and direct your attention to whoever the commentator is. But then you might, go back and forth between the two. Or if you wait long enough, you'll probably see it again if it struck your interest. So it's like a digital ticker tape that's scrolling on the bottom. So here's the point. The journalists and the commentators would all file their stories, into an organization. It was like the wire service, like the ticker tape wire service. They were transmitting like on telephone lines and things like that. You see, maybe the most notable one that I can think of at the moment is API, which is Associated Press International.
Got it.
And that's exactly what it is. Like when you file your story into there, then that gave access to all the other people that might be interested in it. It was the fastest way for news to be spread.
Right.
You see, there's others. Reuters is another one. Can you think of any?
Like Drudge?
Drudge is a good one. Tell them about Drudge.
The Drudge Report was, more or less a news aggregator that pulled news from several different sources and put them on his own platform, and then that in turn became the source for smaller news organizations who wanted to just repeat the same information. So it serves as an echo chamber more than anything.
That's the method to the madness, or the information chamber
to the mayhem. The information to the mayhem.
But it's necessary. You weren't there. Somebody was there. Depending on who we're talking about, you can or cannot rely on their reporting of the news as they saw it. But believe it or not, folks, I don't want you to get caught up in that false news stuff. Fake news stuff and all the rest of that BS. I was gonna say the other word.
Ooh.
There are many people who really take it as their purpose in life to be able to objectively, faithfully report what they saw.
Right.
They ask questions, and they have a way of asking questions. A lot of times it's how, what, when, where, and why. And what they would do is they'll ask a number of people. So right there at the spot on the scene, just kind of like what you saw, with this thing that happened in the D.C. and the Capitol. All those news people were there, and they were going around trying to talk to people. Why are you here? What's going on? Da-da-da. And that's what they would report without adding their opinion to it.
Right.
You see, I'm sorry to say, but there are a number of news sources, both in social media and in the main media, on the broadcast networks, where they will add their opinion. In fact, the problem is that they take one piece of fact and all the rest is opinion.
Right.
You know, and our listening audience has to understand that it's not like it's true because we say it. It's true because you check it out, you know, and you research it and you study it and you do like what we're saying. We're saying that we think it's a good policy for you to go to as many different sources as you possibly can. You begin to see how they begin to overlap, and you can draw a more well-considered conclusion by doing that. And thus you may be in a better position to understand, you know, what's really going on.
Well, I agree with everything you just said. And the reason that I asked you if the media is not properly expressing white supremacy violence is because the media allows, I guess we'd have to call them dog whistles. Well, and for those people who aren't familiar with the term dog whistles as it's used when referring to language, you think of what an actual dog whistle is. A dog whistle is a whistle that when you blow into it, it emits a supersonic noise,
which is
it's a noise
unheard
that above the human frequency, the human range of frequency hearing.
Right, but dogs can hear it. There you go.
But dogs can hear it. So it's you can blow on it, you can't hear it, but every dog in the neighborhood is pissed off at you. Right?
Yes. So
when you're talking about dog whistles in reference to language, a dog whistle is something that someone's saying where you don't know what they mean, but somebody who's in their group knows exactly what they're saying. Right?
Yes.
So here, let's get into this. I put dog whistles, question mark, and then define a dog whistle. So I've done that part. So let's go on. I've been saying for a long time that Trump isn't that stupid. He plays stupid, but he somehow knows how to sound like a babbling idiot to most people while simultaneously sending the perfect dog whistle. I'm not suggesting that he's playing fifth dimensional chess like his believers say, and I do say believers because they are a cult. But he does know how to talk to a specific group of people, or at least he did know how to talk to a specific group of people. And if you don't dive hard into right-wing media, you don't really have a clue what they're saying. You just think that they sound stupid. And that's what he thought that he was doing when he sent all those people down to the Capitol. The only problem is he made his dog whistle too obvious and everybody knew very clearly what he meant. If you look at Snopes, the fact-checking website titled, or look at the Snopes article titled, "Did Trump tell supporters to storm the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021? They call it a mixture, neither true nor false." So I'm going to stop right there and I'm going to ask you, Mr. D, did you feel that with the words that were said, Trump told his supporters to go to the Capitol?
Yes.
Okay. Very short. Yes.
Yes.
as did we all.
And I got it secondhand.
Right.
You know.
And speaking of which, we didn't talk about that, but we're going to get into that in a second.
Okay.
They called it a mixture, neither true or false. And while they didn't use the word dog whistle, they basically landed on the exact same conclusion as I did. He didn't use the exact words, but you knew what he meant. Now, here's the quote from his speech that they pointed to. And bear with me because Trump quotes are difficult because he doesn't talk like a normal human being. Quote, "After this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down. Anyone you want. But I think right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol and cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And probably we're not going to be cheering so much for some of them because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You'll have to show them strength. You'll have to be strong. We have to come and demand that Congress do the right thing. And only the electors who have been lawfully slated, I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building peacefully and patriotically to make your votes heard today." And then later in the same speech, he says, "The best is yet to come. We're going to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. I love Pennsylvania Avenue, and we're going to go to the Capitol, and we're going to try and give the Democrats are hopeless. They never vote for anything, not even one vote. But we're going to go and try and give our Republicans, the weak ones, because the strong ones don't need any of our help. We're going to try and give them the kind of pride and boldness that they need to take our country back. So let's walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. Unquote. Now, you can take that for what you will, but I have a couple more examples of Trump's dog whistles. Do you remember when he was asked to condemn white supremacy and he responded with "stand back and stand by"?
Yes, I do.
Well, what you heard and what his supporters heard was likely the same, although they try and paint it so that they can make it seem like it was different. Immediately following that statement, 5,000 Proud Boys posted the exact message, "stand back and stand by." And in the subsequent months, they used it as a recruiting tool. Do you remember that all that rhetoric about people coming for your suburbs?
I do.
Those were dog whistles. I mean, who lives in the suburbs? Who are you talking to? Find people on both sides? That was a whistle. Hell, "Make America Great Again" was the loudest dog whistle, especially if you know anything about Nazi history. The 1619 Project was released and Trump didn't like it, so as a dog whistle, he announced the 1776 Commission as a committee to, quote, "combat the decades of left-wing indoctrination about race and oppression that has defiled the American story," unquote. And here's where I'm going to explain the significance of 1776 to the Patriot movement. Are you aware of that?
I am.
You're aware of the number 1776 and why it's significant?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware of 1984 and why that's significant?
Yes.
Okay. So,
I've read a lot in my life. But I more importantly, I've spoken to a lot of people in my life.
So have you read George Orwell's 1984?
Part of it, yes.
Okay, I have not.
Oh.
So can you explain to me, well, first, let me explain to the listeners what 1776 verse 1984 is. So to the Patriot movement, to these people who call themselves patriots, 1776 is their answer to 1984. And when they say that, 1984 is a book that Mr. D is about to tell us about, which is something that scares the bejesus out of these people. So their answer to that is 1776, which is the year of the Civil War. So they're saying that
the American Revolution.
I'm sorry, the American Revolution. So they will send us back to the American Revolution to avoid going to whatever this 1984 is. Now, Mr. D, what is 1984?
Well, essentially, 1984 was it was written as a prediction. You know, it was written before 1984. So it was like a futuristic look at what it might be like in 1984.
Mm-hmm. So it was written in the 40s, right? 47, I believe.
Yeah. And that was Orwell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
George
Okay. George Orwell. You know, who's written quite a few other stories and movies as well. Please.
Oh, you mean the Orwellian ones?
Yeah. Yes. You know, and the reason why it's been revisited by many people, just like The Great Gatsby and right. Things like that, Shakespeare and all that. Here in America, because we got others that are writing in other countries and other cultures as well, and they do the same kind of thing. They tap into kind of a gestalt. Well, should I use the word gestalt?
Go for it.
A frame of mind, a projection, an image, a framework. Maybe I say that. And in 1984, the idea was like Big Brother, where the big government was going to be watching you, and always monitoring your activities. And many of these people that, Trump has tapped into, like their fear of big government, and somehow the government is going to take things away from you. And you know, just kind of like the other dictators in the world have, you know, he's distorted the truth, and he's been able to tap into, you know, their anxieties, their worries, and their fears.
And in 1984, it's like they really have control over you, right? Like there's cameras in your house and all kinds of stuff, right? With complete government control, always watching you, stuff like that.
Yes, and I would say that someone, you know, I have access to an iPad, and I'm trying to register into the iPad because I need it for a specific purpose. And I was having difficulty doing it, so, you know, I kind of went on the internet and got some instruction, and some people were talking about some of the capabilities of the iPad, you know, and the iPad has camera, but beyond the camera, it has microphone, but beyond the microphone, it seems to have, and there's a little hole on it somewhere. I think it's in between the two lenses, or maybe it's the lens and the light. I think that's what it is, where it's able to do some kind of 3D spatial recognition.
Really?
So it can recognize objects. And I said, oh, shit. I said, I didn't know that. You know, I know some people that cover up the, you know, those things with tape so you can't see, you know, and they muffle them up so you can't hear, or they don't talk in the room because, you know, from an outsource, there is capability for people to access computers remotely. Right. It's in the code, you know. So, you know, I mean, it's in Microsoft code, that's for sure. But now this is suggesting that it's also in the Apple code as well. So they may be able to actually monitor you through your cell phone, which is a computer, through your iPad, through your laptop, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this is what 1984 was talking about. Right.
So in a way, we are living in some form of that. But the advancement of certain things makes these people feel like they're losing, and so they have to revolt.
Well, to be clear, because I appreciate what you're saying, but I'm past all of that. You know, they are stupid.
Oh no, they absolutely are.
I give them very little credit because when I speak to them, I say, well, you know, so you know somebody that walked up to the Capitol building and was crazy enough to think that, you know, that was okay? You know, like the lady who was crying the blues about she got maced. You know, I got maced, and she's crying. You know, I said, what the hell did you think was going to happen?
That's Elizabeth from Knoxville.
Yeah, she has the keyboard, you know, scarf around her neck, and she really has the look of like, how did that happen? You know. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that you know, you got these people all revved up thinking that somebody's going to come and take something away from them. And it's interesting because they are the beneficiaries of their forefathers having taken something away.
Right.
From black folks.
From everyone.
And Native American people who were living here before them.
Right.
And somehow they have become the Americans. You know, the Browns aren't, the urbanites aren't, you know, the black folks aren't, because the immigrants aren't.
We're all into the American revisionism. We're lost in it in a lot of ways.
So 84 is often read, and it's a good read, I must admit. I probably should read it again, you know, given all that's happened. And I'm thinking that as you read that, you get drawn into, you know, a future. Right. You know, and him being the kind of writer that he was very detailed. He gave you a lot of different things to let your mind chew on and digest. And in that sense, it can be very helpful. Just like the destruction of black civilization.
Yes.
That we were looking at, you know, because he was a writer too. Remember we said he seemed more like a doctor.
And we found out that he was.
Yeah. You know, like he's not just right. He's not just the historian. Not that that's not enough within itself. But he would write things down like it's a story, like it's a narrative, in order to make his point based on the 16 years or so.
And he was coming from a lot of different places.
Yeah,
he had so many degrees in his background. He was able to really lay it down to you and break it down into multiple different ideas. And
that's why we say you should read that book. You see how almost everything we're saying is read. You have to have a conversation with these men and women that have written these books, and then you got to sit down and put the book down and pick it back up, and write in the margins and highlight it and put some pieces of paper, toilet paper. You're sitting on the toilet, you're reading the book, and you talk with your friends about it, people that, you think got some sense, maybe even throw it out to some people that don't have any sense and see what they say, but after a while you kind of get like a constellation of different opinions. And I think that'll work good for you.
I agree. And just to finish up on a couple more examples of dog whistles before I move on, so I can finish this up, is you remember that shithole country thing?
Yeah, I do.
I remember that too. A loud dog whistle, especially when you follow that up by not exactly doubling down, but saying that we need more people from like Scandinavian countries and Norwegian people. Yeah. And Make America Great Again was a Nazi slogan that was borrowed. It used to be Make Germany Great Again.
That's right.
But
that's right.
America First was another one of those.
There you go. Tell them.
America First was first used in the 1920s by the Klan.
And let's not forget, it was also used by Charles Lindbergh.
Oh, I didn't know that it came
Yes.
from. Wow.
Yes. Because as far as he was concerned, he didn't want America, as a country to go into World War II.
Right.
Because he felt, America's ours and we got the Atlantic Ocean on one side and we got, we're closed off. From these conflicts that are going on in other parts of the world, just like Trump thought we were closed off from the COVID virus. Right. You see, so what we're trying to suggest here is that like the more you know history,
the more you see what they're saying.
Yeah, and it doesn't come as quite a surprise anymore. Allow me to say this real quick. I would say multiple sources. There's an easy way to do it. I forgot to mention this. Just Google fact checking. Mm-hmm. Just Google it, and then you'll come up with a lot of people that really take a lot of time and they got a lot of resources at their fingertips to be able to check out when somebody said something and where it came from and this, that, and the other, and they take great pride in being able to pinpoint the original source of whatever that particular concept is.
Right.
So fact checking, just Google fact checking and go down all the different places where people do this, like on a full-time basis.
I'm going to play a little fact check game myself here in about, I'm going to be starting actually as of tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because I just rolled up in that little dog whistle piece that I was talking about where Trump, as a response to the 1619 project, had the 1776 commission put together.
Right.
And they just released their findings.
Which, the 1776 or the 1619?
The 1776 commission just released their findings about a week and a half before Trump left office.
What did they say?
I haven't read all of it.
Just give us one or two.
Honestly, any of it. But I've heard a lot about it, which is going to send me through this. I have to dig through all 45 pages of it. But I do know that they try to say that the slaves were happy under slavery and stuff like that. It's that far gone.
That sounds old. I mean, that sounds.
And that's what they're doing, is they're relying on all those old tropes and bringing them back.
Which is why we talked about the black slave codes. And we traced them basically up to today.
Yeah.
We could talk about the Jim Crow. I think many people would have a living memory of the Jim Crow era, which started, how far back you want to go? Like the Second World War? A little bit before that.
Earlier than that,
the 30s, maybe.
No, earlier than that. Jim Crow started in the right at the end of Reconstruction in the 1890s.
And that's the point I wanted to make. That most folks don't take it back that far.
Right.
And that's why I use the term black slave codes.
Yeah.
There was an outgrowth of that. And allow me to say that if you look up filibuster, because I kind of knew it, but I got several reports and it kind of like, oh, yeah, I think I know what they're talking about, which was developed by Southern Democrats, which was like, well, we still want to maintain, our particular legal code system. They're, and I'm going to leave it at that. So you folks look up
I was
filibuster.
about to ask you to get into that one.
Yeah.
That's
No.
A while.
Yeah. That's why I'm going to let that one go. And that's like now. I mean, like today.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff going back and forth where people are trying to wiggle and wrangle. Making a deal. Well, if you want me to vote for this, then you're going to have to leave filibuster alone. You
know what? Let's make a show out of that. Let's talk. Because I can really make a whole show out of talking all about the filibuster.
Yeah.
I mean, it needs to go. And for those of you who don't know what the filibuster is, just very, very quickly.
Okay.
From my understanding, you know how you'll see politicians go to vote on something and they can't just vote on the one thing. There's always a million things tied into voting on one thing.
Unrelated things.
Things. Yeah. That's part of the filibuster. And what the filibuster does is they'll write up these laws that have all these different things tied into them, and then somebody will slap a filibuster on it, which requires them to have a super majority in order for it to pass.
And they don't even have to be present.
And exactly.
See?
And so all it does is muddy the waters, and all it's ever done is muddy the waters since its inception. It was conceived to help racist people in the South keep their racist policies. So we're going to talk about that in a couple of weeks. I really can make a whole show out of that.
You can. And that's the level of sophistication that I think, our community needs to get to. See, for the sake of time, I would simply say, given the privilege of being able to speak to you, I would simply say that now that you have voted and you see how voting helped, we got to vote like we mean it, like there is no tomorrow. We got to vote like our lives depended on it, and that our asses are going to hang if we don't. And I use the word hang because I think that can draw up a kind of image. It's got to be like 85%. Vote for the party that's going to treat us right, because they know that they have to do some of the things that we're asking them to do, and since the other party's been trying to push us aside and claim the country for themselves, we got to show them that we ain't voting for you, So it's almost like we got to put all our eggs in one basket, and I hate to say that because that's not a safe thing to do, But given the fact that the filibuster is an issue like today in Washington D.C. that's being discussed, and you begin to realize it's a hangover, a throwback, to prejudice,
right?
The South, slavery, maintaining control. Process, it's a process move. They want to talk about the Constitution says this and the Constitution says that, and they hide behind that as if the Constitution is supposed to be the final arbiter of all of the things that we do in this country. But they have basically rigged up the Constitution, and they hide behind the rules and the regulations that are governing the Congress, which is the House of Representatives, and the Senate, like the one they had in Rome. Emphasis on the word Rome.
Right.
And thank goodness that now it's a 50-50 split. But see, that's still too close.
Yes, I agree.
You see, so
with Kamala being the deal breaker.
If that becomes necessary, that's still too close. And a lot of these are white folks. I mean, not that all white folks are bad, but it's like it's still too close because some of them may say, "Oh no, I'm going to vote the other way anyway." So we have a situation where it needs to be like 2/3 or more of one party. And I hate to say this because one party having too much influence and power is the reason why the Republican Party is doing what it's been doing. You know, the Democrats can be the same way. But looking at it from the moment right now, the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the White House. See, the Congress, which is the House of Representatives and the Senate, is 1/3 of a three-legged stool. You know, the other one is the White House. Well, clearly, that's a Biden thing with all of his, you know, committees and, you know, all the other people that he's relying on. And then you got the third leg, which is the Supreme Court, where, you know, things can still happen. But the idea is that we got to do more than just vote. We got to vote more than we just did. I think that's what I'm trying to say. We got to vote more than what we just did in order to make it a real overwhelming majority, more than 2/3, you see, to be able to influence this. But after the voting stops, you know, we got to do it with our money, which is a whole nother conversation. And we must not forget that we got to be up in people's faces. I think they call it lobbying. You know,
we've talked about that before.
Yes, the idea is that we got to be up in the offices of the people. We got to be telling them what we want, and we got to say, okay, this is what we want you to do, and if you do this, we'll vote for you. And if you don't do it, we won't vote for you. It's kind of like I saw in a movie where this woman, an African woman, was dancing, and she had a sword or a spear or something, you know, and she was representing the people, and while they were coronating the king, you know, she would dance up to the king and she would take the sword or the spear, you know, and she put it on the king's shoulder. And then she put it on the other side of the king's shoulder. Now, without you knowing, what did that mean to you?
Well, because I grew up in America, that means she was knighting him.
Knighting. Okay.
Yes.
Because you grew up in America.
Because I grew up in America.
You're absolutely right. Well, it turns out that it meant you are here to serve the people. And if you don't, you won't be here. You see what I'm saying?
But that's the difference in African and European culture.
There you go.
Because in Africa, the word king had a different meaning completely than the European version of a king. In Africa, a king was the voice of the people.
Yes.
As opposed to being the absolute monarchy, the one voice that matters.
Yes.
You know, so that makes complete sense.
So when we look at the fact that we vote in bigger numbers than we currently have, which was sufficient to be able to, you know, just edge out a victory on the Democratic side, because it looks like, you know, the heart is more for us in that side than the other side,
right? You know,
than the Republican side, which is more beholding to, you know, evangelicals, you know, white Americans, middle America, the rural people and all that, you know, the disenfranchised people, and big business, you know, like money donations, you know. But as we look at how we see the Democrats trying to, you know, position themselves and pass some legislation, you know, we need to be in the faces of all of these people, telling them what we want. You know, we have to have an active voice on a day-to-day basis, not just during election time.
I agree. And I'm glad that you're talking about voting. I'm glad that that's what we're landing on, because that's going to segue quite nicely into what we're talking about today. And I could have talked about this when we were talking about voting in the 3 episodes that we did around the election, but I didn't. And I didn't because this is halfway a voting issue and halfway not.
True.
It was kind of planned to make it a voting issue.
Planned by who?
We'll get into that. Some of our old friends from previous episodes pop back up. Remember Ben Tillman?
Yes.
Yeah, he pops back up in this one. So I'm going to start off by saying that race riot, or this is the title for this, race riot as a term is revisionist history. And I'm going to start by saying that I don't think that I can stress the fact enough that every single historic event in U.S. history that has been called a race riot needs to be restudied. Race riot as a term is revisionist. They apply it to any event where they cannot otherwise justify their behavior, and so they use the term race riot to obscure the events of the past. This way they can make it seem as if there was some type of resistance, and that way the massacre that they caused would be justifiable. This is only one. Oh, I'm sorry. But this one is incredibly sinister, and it's also incredibly relevant in light of the recent events, because this is obscuring the only successful coup d'etat in U.S. history, the Wilmington coup of 1898. But why haven't you heard of this before? Well, it's because it was democratically elected black officials being overthrown by white people who threw a tantrum. Now, let's start our discussion with a quote from the Democratic Party leader Daniel. I always have problems with names that have a sh in them. It's this Daniel Schnetter or something like that. It's spelled Schener. Schener. The Democratic Party leader Daniel Schener. Now, quote, "It will be the meanest, vilest, dirtiest campaign since 1876. The slogan for the Democratic Party, from the mountains to the sea, will be but one word: nigger." Close quote. Now, there are 3 reasons for historic race riots. Can you name one?
Prejudice?
True. I mean, that's the reason for all of them.
Should I say a fear?
I got political power or voting.
Oh, well,
Economic prosperity of blacks.
well, economic power.
Mm-hmm. And sex.
Sex, huh?
Sex. There was a ton of lynchings and race riots that were over the reported rapes of white women by black men.
Now, I see your point though. I just thought the connection between lynchings like that that you just mentioned and race riots, that wasn't as apparent to me. But now you've made it very apparent.
We're gonna let's introduce some old characters that we've spoken about before. We're gonna talk about the red shirts. In one of our earlier episodes, we spoke about the Hamburg Massacre, and this is when the racist former governor of South Carolina, Benjamin Tillman, who also served in the Senate for about 40 years afterwards, led a group called the Red Shirts to slaughter a black militia known as the South Carolina National Guard. You remember that?
I do.
Okay. Now, also, I posed a question during that episode where I thought that maybe the National Guard, the history of the National Guard was them absorbing a bunch of black militias. They did absorb a bunch of black militias, so I was halfway right, but they also absorbed a bunch of white ones too, so I was also halfway wrong. Just wanted to put that out there. So, back to the Red Shirts, also known as the Red Shirts of the Southern states. The Red Shirts were a paramilitary organization that was active between 1875 and 1900. They were extremely racist and extremely violent, and wholly dedicated to terrorizing black people and white people who were sympathetic to black people, then called carpetbaggers and scallywags. It should be noted that most sources have considered them to be the paramilitary branch of the Democratic Party. Now, keep this in mind. This was before the party switch. The party switch didn't happen until 1964 when the Republican Party of Lincoln decided that they wanted to roll out the red carpet for racists in the South, and they tried to elect Barry Goldwater. Now, think of this in the modern context when we think of storming the Capitol, regardless of what people say today.
Let me interrupt you just as a point of clarification. I think you should explain, because you're talking about the Southern Democrats.
Yes.
And how what they did, the Republican Party, the party of Lincoln, what they did, and how, it got changed So, like when we talk about the Democratic Party now, it's different from the Democratic Party then.
Okay, so
the Republican Party now is different from the Republican Party then.
Right.
So you might want to clear that up a little bit.
The Republican Party, which is now the GOP, or the bad guys, if depending on the people who want to see the whole world go to crap. Those people used to be the party that black people supported. The whole party switch thing confuses a lot of people. So whenever you're talking about Democrats or Republicans prior to the 1960s, this is the event that happened. Prior to that, they weren't really called Democrats. They were called Dixiecrats, or at least a lot of people nicknamed them Dixiecrats.
Yes.
And those were the Southern Democrats who, man, they were they were horrible people.
Ku Klux Klanners.
Yeah,
that's
the modern day GOP is what was then the Dixiecrats.
The Dixiecrats. There you go. Good one.
They wanted to, in the 60s, right around just after the signing of the Civil Rights Act, it was the Republicans who, like I said, they wanted to roll out the red carpet. They were trying to make things easier for the South to make it an easier pill for the South to swallow after the Civil Rights Act was signed in 1964. And so they were trying to garner some support for that side.
But before that, let's and again, we ask that those that are listening, check it out for themselves. Because, these are the people that were going around lynching people.
Yes.
They were going around raping people.
Yes.
They were taking black folks' land.
Yes.
They were telling black folks they can't read. Step off the sidewalk. Segregationists.
Yes.
Okay? I mean, I think maybe for the sake of time, that's the easiest word I can mention. That's who these folks were. And they were trying to use the color of the law and the Constitution, the state legislature, and all the the county and all that kind of stuff. They were the voting. I'm going to use the word revisionists, although that's not the word I want to use. Where I've heard stories of, guess how many marbles are in this jar.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you guessed it right, they would tell you it was a different number.
Wrong, right.
I mean, educated black folks like teachers.
Yeah, we covered the literacy test. We have educated people from today that can't pass those tests.
Who's the governor of so and so? Right there when you can't vote now. Okay, so you go back and they asked the governor of a different state. So the educated black folks. And there were many of them.
Right.
So, okay, well, I know all of them. And then they would ask you a different question, and so it was like a moving goalpost all the time, in an effort to be able to stop people from voting. Does that sound familiar to you all? Y'all? No. Does it sound familiar? Voter intimidation? Voter suppression. I mean, haven't we heard about this? How many months ago was that?
It sounds like it happened then and never happened again.
Yeah,
it sounds like it's never happened since.
See, it's there all over again. It's the same tactics that are being, and that's why we can't fall for it anymore.
Right.
In this past election, the same kind of things were being done. And now the call, in a new way, is kind of like voter. What's the word? It begins with an F. Fraud.
Speaking of voter fraud, I found an actual case of voter fraud.
Of course.
Did you hear about the mayor of Hawthorne?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, the mayor of Hawthorne got busted on a voter fraud scheme. Him and somebody else signed up like 8,000 homeless people, but that was for the purposes of his own election.
Of his own election. Well, to be truthful, you can't say it does not exist.
Oh,
the problem is that it doesn't exist in a fashion that is sufficient to be able to overturn, the people's vote. They talk about 70, whatever the new number is, million. I said, well, I talk about 76 million or 80 million or whatever that number is. And there's millions upon millions of people voted the other way. And out of 60 or so court cases, they were all turned down because for being without merit, without evidence. So it's a lot of yak. So the same techniques are being used. They're using different words, but it traces back to these Southern Democrats, these Dixiecrats, and it goes back to segregationists and the Southern Democrats and the Jim Crow laws and the red shirts, all the way back.
But a lot can also be said for the other side, the people who would be considered the modern day Democrats,
yes,
who were in that day the Republican.
Yes.
A lot can be said for them, because after Reconstruction, you see them start to make things very easy for the Dixiecrats to grow and gain power. You see what I'm saying? They start making compromises all over the place. You got the Missouri Compromise, the Compromise of 1877. There's all kinds of compromises that they start making so to get the South to be comfortable with coming back into the Union. And they open up the doors for a lot of people to be hurt and die, because it was never about black people. It was never about black people. It was always about their own power. So back to what we were saying, I know that most sources that I've seen will consider the red shirts to be the paramilitary branch of the Democratic Party, and think of that in the modern context when we speak of people storming the Capitol. Regardless of what people say today, historians will write about these people as a paramilitary branch of the modern Republican Party. Now, I've introduced the red shirts, and let's talk about the political environment. This was only 33 years after the end of the Civil War. It's a period known as Reconstruction had just ended, and Jim Crow is just beginning. Plessy versus Ferguson is now only 6 years old, and Plessy versus Ferguson, if you remember from previous episodes, is the separate but equal doctrine, which was considered the worst Supreme Court decision in history because of the way it allowed white people to discriminate against blacks and cut them off otherwise. But at the same time, Republicans who had just recently began making all kinds of compromises to the Democratic Southern states to get them to feel comfortable in the new America, compromised like the Compromise of 1877 that we spoke about just a few minutes ago. During Reconstruction, as we spoke about in our voting episodes, black men were being elected to office all over the country. Many, as a result, were subsequently assassinated. All over the country, white men were beginning to break off from the Democratic Party and form their own new party called the People's Party, also known as the Populist Movement. Naturally, to the fears of the powers of white supremacy, black men and white men working together was problematic. The Democrats in 1898 were hell-bent on ending the quote-unquote Negro domination in the 1898 state legislative elections. Their strategy was a rabid media campaign with written articles and political cartoons for the illiterate. Even if you couldn't read, they made sure that you knew exactly what time it was come voting day through the use of these racist political cartoons. A Georgia socialite and crusading journalist for the Atlanta Constitution named Rebecca Felton wrote a speech about the dangers of being a farm wife. She described a world where white women were being raped by black men while their husbands worked the field. She suggested the solution to this was lynching, and a lot of it. Here's a quote from her speech. "When there is not enough religion in the pulpit to organize a crusade against sin, nor justice in the courthouse to promptly punish crime, nor manhood enough in the nation to put a sheltering arm about innocence and virtue, if it need lynching to protect a woman's dearest possessions from the raving human beasts, then I say lynch 1,000 times a week if necessary." Here's a bonus fact about her. Her speech was effective because her husband, William Felton, was a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. And then she, later on, would become the first woman to serve in the U.S. Senate, even though she only served for one day. I think they did it to keep her name in the books of history. So this is where we introduce the new character in our story, Alexander Manly. Alexander Manley was the editor of the Daily Record, a black newspaper from Wilmington at the time. He was born in Raleigh and was the grandson of the former governor Charles Manley and Corinne Manley, his former slave. His brothers were also well educated. His brothers were well educated, as was he, and this is why his brother Frank helped him to get control of the Daily Record. He had the backing of white advertisers and investors due to his blood connections, and as a result, the paper flourished. This was until the 18th of August, 1898, when Alexander Manley published a paper challenging Rebecca Felton. Now, I'm going to pull out this article of his because his he talks about a lot of some of the things that you were actually mentioning earlier, Mr. D. And this is it right here. All right. A Miss Felton from Georgia makes her speech before the Agricultural Society at Tybee, Georgia, in which she advocates lynching as an extreme measure. This woman makes a strong plea for womanhood, and if the alleged crimes of rape were half as frequent as is oftentimes reported, her plea would be worthy of consideration. Miss Felton, like many other so-called Christians, loses sight of the basic principle of religion of Christ in her plea for one class of people as against another. If a missionary spirit is essential for the uplifting of the poor white girl, then why is it? The morals of the poor white people are on par with their colored neighbors of conditions, and if one doubts the statement, then let him visit among them. The whole lump needs to be leavened by those who profess so much religion and showing them that the presence of virtue is essential for the life of any people. Miss Felton begins well, for she admits that education will better protect the girls on the farm from the assaulter. We admit that it should not be confined to the white any more than the colored girls. The papers are filled with often with reports of rapes of white women and subsequent lynchings of the alleged rapists. Editors put forth volumes of aspersions against all Negroes because of the few who may be guilty. If the papers and speakers of the other race would condemn the commissions of the crime because it is a crime and not try to make it appear that the Negroes were the only criminals, they would find their strongest allies in the intelligent Negroes themselves, and together the whites and blacks would root out the evil of both races. We suggest that whites guard their women more closely, and as Miss Felton says, thus giving no opportunity for the human fiend, be he black or white. Leave your goods outdoors and then complain because they're taken away. Oh, he said, I'm sorry. You leave your goods outdoors and then complain that they're taken away. Poor white men are careless in the matter of protecting their women, especially on farms. They're careless of the conduct towards them, and in our experience teaches us that the women of that race are no more particular in the matter. Are no more particular in the matter of clandestine meetings with colored men than are whites with colored men. White men with colored men, sorry. Meetings of this kind go on for some time until the woman's infatuation or boldness brings attention to them, and then the man is lynched for rape. Every Negro called a big burly black brute, when in fact those who have been dealt this have had white men for their forefathers and were not only big, black, and burly, but also sufficiently attractive for white girls and culture and refinement to fall in love with them, and this is all very well known. Miss Felton must begin at the fountain if she wishes to purify the stream. Teach your men purity and let virtue be something more than an excuse for them to intimidate and torture helpless people. Tell your men that it is no worse for a black man to intimidate a white woman than for a white man to intimidate a colored woman. Set yourselves down as you do a lot of you set yourselves down as a lot of carping hypocrites, and in fact you cry aloud for the virtue of your women while you seek to destroy the morality of ours. Don't think that your women will remain pure while you're debauching ours. You sow the seed, the harvest will come in due time. That's his entire editorial. Now, I got a question for you. What kind of a shit show do you think that editorial caused in 1898?
Okay. I would say that. Well, I'll teach that nigga a lesson. Like who does he think he is? That's what I think. Was the result of that. Although there's a lot of truth to what he said.
Oh, a ton of it.
But because it cut in a logical way, a very reasonable and logical way. It cut through the counter argument, and I think those ignorant folks, those ignorant white folks, got worried, anxious, a smart nigga,
Yeah.
and then they were going to, I'll show them, and they result to brute force, which is, and thank you for all of that, but it brings me right back up to these same people standing up there talking about our country and, the socialists, the socialist Democrats, the radical left,
right.
they use these words, and they only think like that much, it's not a lot of thought is what I'm trying to say.
Exactly.
And they go on the impulse and they use it as an excuse, to go out and destroy. And that's why, there are many in our community that say they're the devil. There are many in our community that say that they are the destructive people. Well, that's another conversation right there. The point I'm trying to make is that we as black folks coming from Africa, are not like that.
Not at all.
I think in the long run it will work out the way it seems to be working out. No matter what they do, we're still here, but at the same time, there are times when I want to say you need to,
grow the fuck up.
We'll go there.
Yeah, I told somebody that the other day.
Yeah.
Like, you need to grow up.
Yeah. There are times where, the monster needs to be destroyed, and I say that with reservations. I don't want it to go out like I said that I'm advocating anything, because that sounds like what Trump tried to do.
Right.
Because I think God is on our side, and I've seen a lot of progress because of that, without the repercussions of the violence. Because when you put violence on someone, then there's usually the revenge thing that comes back, and it comes back to you. You see, and that's divine law that many of these people haven't understood. I mean, think about it. You look at all the stuff that these same folks had done to the people that were here before them. Mm-hmm. I mean, everywhere they go, they got to do this.
Everywhere.
Like World War I and World War II was run, because white folks couldn't get it right. You know what I mean? And many of them still think anytime they get showed up, then they want,
we're being oppressed.
Yeah. But look what you've been doing.
Yeah. But see, but that's the thing though. And this is what I appreciate about his editorial, even though it caused a world of hurt for a lot of people.
Yeah.
He exposed the fact that white people were doing then the same thing that they're doing now. They're doing,
and that's the point I think you're trying to make.
Right. They're doing all kinds of horrible shit, and then they're telling you that you're doing that horrible shit.
And now you've made it.
Yeah, they're putting it on you.
Yeah.
The thing that they're actually doing. And they've been doing it for a number of years.
And the wise person simply won't buy what they're selling.
Exactly.
It's just, I mean, and that's why I say, we got to wise up, open up our eyes and figure out how we're going to do it too. We don't need to be going through this conversation anymore. I mean, look, how many different places can you, listener, think about where somebody who had a real beef, a legitimate beef, they were being mistreated and had been mistreated for a long time.
Yeah. And
when they finally stand up and say, I can't take it anymore, now they are labeled as the person who's being what? Violent.
Here we go with the stereotypes.
Civil disorder.
Angry black woman, all that.
See, so I think that lesson, uncommon, is quite a, an insightful lesson And I hope that our listeners were able to, kind of catch that. And the beautiful thing about it is that they can research it themselves.
Yes. And you know what else they can research?
What?
They can research the response to this editorial, because I'll tell you what, it was terrible. The response was not received well. Immediately, Alex Manley began to receive death threats. He lost his advertisers and investors within days, and black businessmen in the area begged him to recant his editorial due to fear of violence.
See, they knew.
Yeah.
Do you have any of those quotes?
No, but I do have a
okay.
quote. The next thing I wrote is a quote from Ben Tillman, the senator who led the Red Shirts.
Yes.
He was visiting from the neighboring state, South Carolina, where he was from, and he asked, "Why didn't you kill that nigger who wrote that editorial?"
There you go. You know what I would say? I would say it's the same kind of so I've heard on the radio and on TV, some people like saying my white privilege, and I'm saying, what the blank, 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 like what privilege is that? What makes you think you got privilege? Privilege about what? But the fact is that they want to claim it as some kind of advantage over somebody else. See, I got something that you don't have. And that makes me think about whether it's a nice car or a well-paying job, or you living in a particular neighborhood where they got more open space so that you don't have to be caught up in the COVID thing as much as other people do. You know what I'm saying? You live in somewhere where it's wide open, people are distance from each other, it's peaceful, it's quiet, the helicopters are flying around, you have money. You got position, you got influence, you went to a particular college, you got a network of people, you got your own business started, you got an insurance policy. I mean, I can go on, but the foolishness of it is that because of this, it's like, I got this, you don't have it, and that makes me better than you. So somehow I'm more than you because I got something, but it's always something that you don't have. And I got it because, and then they name a reason. Usually it's like,
because I pulled my bootstraps up harder.
There you go. And I deserve it.
Right.
But here's the other side of this now. You don't deserve it. See, because it's your fault that you don't have it. Mm-hmm. Yet, things like what you just mentioned, or the black soldiers coming back from the war, the GI Bill, where, yes, it's true, they got a preferential rate on their mortgages backed by the government, but they were only put into certain areas. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. And those are the areas that were less desirable than the other areas. And to this very day, that's why you see a lot of black communities near the railroad tracks, near that's why gentrification has come in to be able to take that back again.
Right.
I'll leave it at that, because, it shows how government policy, as much as we need it to help us, can often be led astray.
Well, that depends on who's the government.
Yes. And that whole idea, I'm glad you mentioned that, because the whole idea of the government, let me ask that question, to you who are listening. So when we say, or when you say the government, yes, when you say the government, who does that mean? Now answer that question to yourself.
And think of it. Just think of the federal level, Okay,
yeah. Local, state, there's county, state, federal level. Most folks, because I've actually asked this question, they think of it somebody else, and they're not part of the government.
Right.
See, and that's how they get flim-flammed.
Exactly.
Because you are the government.
Exactly.
But you need to claim your right in that. You need to participate in that.
You should be the government. They should be representing you.
No, you are the government. I'm going to take it to that level. And I would say that, the political power, I think over this past election has become a lot more apparent to a lot of people. And I thank my people, my community, for getting out there in spite of all the obstacles that are put in the way to get out there and turn the tide a little bit. But I'm saying a little bit because it needs to be turned more. But I'm saying we don't need to be waiting for political power because we got a different kind of power. It's the power that comes from when we spend our money, and I know this as a fact. There's been many studies done, which show the economic power of black folks. And I would say back in the 70s, 80s, somewhere in there, they were talking about $30 billion. In fact, there was a book called 30 Billion in the Black, written by D. Park Gibson and someone else, which was a study about how black folks would buy things like beer, cigarettes, liquor, soda, corn chips, potato chips, and all the other things. It's a book. But I've heard recently that 30 billion is more like 300 billion now, and next to Nigeria, I believe that the blacks in America is the largest economic block of black people in the world.
I would believe that because in Black Labor, White Wealth, which was, I believe, written in the 90s, Claude Anderson writes about the power of the black dollar and how the collective power of the black dollar in America, at least at the time he wrote it, and he's an economist, was I want to say 9th biggest on earth.
Okay. With California being number 5, I believe, right? The whole of California?
I believe.
State of California, 5th largest economy in the world?
Something like
right?
that.
Okay,
Yeah.
So 9th in the world?
9th in the world.
That's a lot.
It is. But it also has to do with living in America. You know what I mean? Because even if you're in third world living conditions, you're still in the first world.
But that's not the point I'm trying to make here. Because we're talking about we have to use the resources that we have at our disposal. We need to stop having to wait for somebody to justify what we say we want. We just got to do it our own damn self.
I agree.
The own blessed self.
There's an interesting TED talk that you can look up that kind of speaks to what you're saying, and it's titled "Gentrify Your Own Neighborhood Before They Do."
I think I might have heard that, which is another good source that we should mention. Yeah, TED Talks.
TED Talks are great sources.
I'm thank you for bringing that up. What is it? What is it called? Technical.
I don't even know what TED
education and something else. TED.
Yeah.
I think it's TED.org.
I don't know. I would just type in TED Talks and they pop up.
TED Talk, yeah. Some very interesting things can be said in it. Again, folks, we've said it many times. We'll keep on saying it many times. You got to open up your eyes and you got to start thinking for yourselves and get your sources together. I hope that some of what we're saying is of use to you, to motivate you, just like Common motivated that the person to read,
right.
Read and listen and think and discuss, and spread the word out and make decisions that are beneficial to you as an individual first. I say that with a lot of conviction because as a person that has been in a plane, I'll use that one. When you're in the plane, they'll tell you that in the case of an emergency, when those oxygen masks drop out, they say you need to grab yours first. You see, not, and the instinct would be, well, I'm going to help my spouse or my kid or this and that and the other.
Can't help nobody if you dead.
Yeah, you can't help nobody if you can't breathe. Right. And we need to have our resources in place no matter what. So that we don't have to be dependent. So if the political play, doesn't work out, then we still can survive. We can take care of ourselves first. And from that, we can take care of our families.
Yes. And
from that, we can take care of our community, our churches, our businesses, our schools.
Yep.
It's really, what is it? The Kwanzaa principle number what? It's called self-determination.
That's 2.
Yeah. You know, be wise, folks. That's what I'm trying to say.
I agree. Now, back to Mr. Manley, Mr. Alex Manley, because he wrote this editorial and the world began to collapse on him. His newspaper was now financially crippled, which was probably the only thing that convinced the mob of people not to burn his newspaper to the ground immediately, because that posse did get formed. But they were told to save their anger for a more convenient time. And that time would be 3 months in the future, a little closer to the election. But in the meantime, white supremacist leaders used the editorial to beat the drum and turn up the fire. Former Confederate General Alfred Waddell gave a speech suggesting that white people should choke the Cape River with carcasses if necessary to keep the blacks away from the polls. And that was a quote. On the day of the election, just like what the Klan did in the Ocoee Massacre, the red shirts in this case patrolled the black neighborhood with guns, keeping people away from the polls. And in turn, the bad guy Democrats, which is what I'm going to call them to make sure that we're clear that this is before the party switch, the bad guy Democrats won every seat in that election. But like I said earlier, this was a midterm, and these were all legislative seats, and the city government positions remained intact temporarily. This is a good time to stop and do a little background on what Wilmington, North Carolina was like and why these white people were so threatened by it. Wilmington was a bit of a black metropolis. This is from history.com. By 1896, nearly 126,000 black men in Wilmington were registered voters. They had a flourishing middle class with 65 doctors, lawyers, and educators, scores of barbers and restaurant owners, public health workers, and members of the police force and fire department. Black Republicans held multiple positions of power, serving as councilmen, magistrates, and other positions.
Point of clarification. Black Republicans?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And this is the point where we explore a new term. We've talked about white people in this era who were sympathetic to black causes, and in earlier episodes we discussed carpetbaggers who were Northerners who came south and worked for to change things. But there are other types of white people who were sympathetic to black causes, and those were called scallywags. Unlike Northerners who came to the South, scallywags were people who were from the South and worked for change. The black government in the story gained and maintained power through merging with the growing populist party that we spoke of earlier in the episode. They formed the Fusion Party and were a bit of a force. Now, it should be noted here that this populist party that had broken off from the Democratic Party at the time, they were mainly farmers. Just thought that'd be an interesting note to think about. It was mostly the poorest of the whites that were in line with the black idea and the black government. It was the wealthy whites who drove a wedge in between them.
And was this in 1960s?
No. This is still in 1896, 1898.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You see me smiling, right?
Right, because it's never changed.
Yeah. It's the same. The foundation of our community. Right. Saying, "Oh no, we ain't going for this." Anyway, continue.
Okay. The Fusion Party aligned against the bad guy Democrats of old and believed that the Democrats Party was a party of wealth. They believed that the Democrats were a party of wealthy white segregationists that cared more about the interests of banks, railroads, and affluent constituents than the common man.
Point of clarification. No, I'm sorry. Point of repetition. Who was that?
Banks, railroads, and affluent constituents.
I heard you say banks.
Mm-hmm.
Banks. Like financial institutions. right?
And technically, if
Okay.
you want to say you can swap out railroads and say businesses.
Yeah, that's where I was going with that. You know, corporations and business,
Yep.
right? And what was the third one?
Affluent.
Affluent, huh? Oh, affluent. Now, who's the affluent people now that are busy massaging your mind?
The My Pillow guy.
Yes, you know, yeah. Just you know, float with that for a while.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they saying stuff. You know what I mean? And got you thinking. And what's even more insidious is that they got some of those same people saying stuff to some of them other people, trying to rile them up.
Mama, there go that word again.
It's interesting. You know, it's quite marvelous actually to understand it, so that you don't get the okie doke again.
Right.
You know, you don't get the sucker punch.
Now, here's another thing that you might think is interesting. The combination of the populists and Republicans seized control of the state actually 4 years earlier in 1894. Now, this is what they were talking about. This is what they meant when they vowed to end the Negro domination of the legislative positions in that state.
Right.
Was that they had to spend 4 years listening to a black mayor.
Right.
Yeah. Now, back to the day after the election, because we know that the Democrats won every seat because they intimidated people with guns, right? So the red shirts the red shirts, several militias, and white citizens who felt compelled to join their cause formed an 800-member posse led by Alfred Waddell, the former Confederate general, to the county courthouse, where they produced the White Citizens Declaration of Independence, which I have the whole thing, but I'm not going to read it.
Can you give us a few excerpts from it?
Okay. It's not that long. I can read the whole thing.
Oh, okay.
Let me just pull it out. Boop, 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 boop. The White Citizens Declaration of Independence. Believing that the Constitution of the United States contemplated a government to be carried out by enlightened people.
Ooh, that's a dog whistle?
Oh, yeah. Enlightened? Are you talking about enlightened skin color? Believing that its framers did not anticipate the enfranchisement of an ignorant population of African origin.
No dog whistle there. That's quite
it's very direct.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. But it's clear.
And believing that those men of the state of North Carolina who joined in framing the Union did not contemplate for their descendants subjugation to an inferior race. We, the undersigned citizens of Wilmington and New Hanover, do hereby declare that we will no longer be ruled and never again be ruled by men of African origin. This condition we have in part endured because we have felt that the consequences of the War of Secession, which were such as to deprive us from the fair consideration of many of our countrymen. While we recognize the authority of the United States and willed it to be exerted, we would not be for a moment to believe that it is the purpose of 60 million of our own race to subject us permanently to a fate to which no Anglo-Saxon has ever been forced to submit. We therefore believing that we represent unequivocally the sentiments of white people of this country and city, and hereby ourselves, as representative of them, proclaim that the time has come for the intelligent citizens of the community owning 95% of the property and paying the taxes in portion to end the rule by the Negroes, that we will not tolerate the action of unscrupulous white men in affiliating with Negroes so that by means of their vote they can dominate with the intelligent and thrifty element of the community, thus causing business to stagnate and progress to be out of question. That the Negro has demonstrated by antagonizing our interests in every way, and especially by his ballot, that he is incapable of realizing his interests, his interests are and should be identical with those of the community. that the progressive element in any community is the population, is the white population, and that the giving of nearly all of the employment to the Negro laborers has been against the best interests of this county and city, and is the sufficient reason why the city of Wilmington, with its natural advantages, has not become a city of at least 50,000 inhabitants. We propose in the future to give white men a large part of the employment heretofore given to Negroes, because we realize that white families cannot thrive here unless there are more opportunities for employment of the different members of their families. That we, white men, expect to live in this community peacefully and to have and provide absolute protection for our families, who shall be safe from insult or injury from all persons whomsoever. We are prepared to treat Negroes with justice in all manners which do not involve sacrifice of the intelligent and progressive portion of the community, but are equally prepared now and immediately to enforce what we know to be our rights, that have been our desire for harmony and peace, blindsided both our interests and our rights. A climax was reached when the Negro paper of this city published an article so vile and slanderous that it would, in most communities, have resulted in a lynching, and yet there is no punishment there provided by the courts adequate for offense. We therefore owe it to the people of this community, as protection against such license in the future, that the record cease to be published and that its editor be banished from this community. We demand that he leave this city forever within 24 hours after the assurance of this proclamation. Second, that the printing press from which the record had been issued be shipped from the city without delay, and that we be notified within 12 hours of the acceptance of this rejection demand. If the demand is agreed to, we counsel forbearance on the part of white men. If the demand is refused, or the no answer is given within the time mentioned, then the editor Manley will be expelled by force.
Now, that in itself is worth having spent all this time listening to this. So research that, folks. It reminds me of, just as because I like to try to bring it up till today. Over the last couple of days, I've heard about censorship. I think the word is censor, of several Republican representatives in Arizona. Among them is Liz Cheney.
Really?
Yeah, the third most powerful Republican in the country.
That's interesting that they would go after her.
Liz Cheney. Yeah, and the reason why is what? Because of the Trump thing.
Well, but I'm confused about that, because she came out, and I understand who she is, but she right away condemned those actions. There's
no reason to be confused about it, because that's the reason why they're censoring her.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No. I thought you were going to mention Lauren Boebert.
I haven't mentioned that one yet. I said Liz Cheney.
Oh, no, I thought you were going to get to that.
Because she is feeling like the Capitol building should not have been stormed, and somehow there are Republican people, just similar to these people that you just mentioned, who are trying to say, "Oh, this is not right," and they try to turn it into something other than what it actually is. Yeah. That's the point I want to make. I mean, so this happening when it did a long time ago, and something happening in the past several days. It's the same tactic, folks. That people are using, and they try to make it sound legit. But it's covering up their true intentions. And the second point I want to make is this. On page 161 in The Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams, we call him Dr. Chancellor Williams, chapter 6, Roman numeral 6, The African Constitution, Birth of Democracy.
Oh, we're going to talk about that.
So here we are. These people talking about, somehow, they're not being treated fairly by black folks who were just trying to speak truth and ask for justice. Right. You see? And there's another chapter. I'm just reading the chapter section titles. I think I should call them that. The subtitles of the chapters. Here's one, Origins of African Democracy, and he lays it out. He goes on to talk about early education. He goes on to talk about the earliest judicial system. You know, he goes on to talk about some political theories and principles of the ancient African constitution law and the fundamental rights of the African people, and he lays out quite a bit there. And the last thing I'll mention is the fundamental rights of the African people. And all this predates,
Jesus.
Egypt, Jesus, the Romans, the Greeks, even the Egyptians, who were African, by the way, so this is his thesis is that this was all in place way before any of that stuff happened. And he also gives some reasons why, it ended up being destroyed or disrupted or what have you. And it's not just people, people from other places and people from within the African communities, with the climate and, other environmental factors, So the point I'm trying to make here is that here, these people are talking all that craziness about black folks that were just saying what sounded to me like a pretty reasonable proposition.
Yes.
And somehow, so the less thinking of their constituency would, oh yeah, that's right. Now we got to go do something. It sounds just like the people that stormed the Capitol building.
Absolutely.
You see, and that's the point I kind of want to guide you to. It's the same playbook.
It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing.
If you don't study it, if you don't know it, if you don't read it, if you don't search for it, then you're going to be listening to what they say.
Exactly. Their narratives.
Yeah. But when you dig a little deeper, just dig a little deeper, folks, you begin to realize that that's the flim flam. It's the fake out.
Yes.
That's the fake news.
And I mean, think about it. Think about the how ludicrous it is to go to the courthouse and read this document and say that this is the white people's Declaration of Independence, as if the fucking Declaration of Independence isn't the white people's Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're in such they have such
denial.
A need to be oppressed.
Yes. To be oppressed?
To be oppressed. They fantasize about being oppressed so much that they're always talking about how oppressed they are.
I thought you were going to say to oppress. Yeah. But yeah, I see what you mean. It's kind of like an inferiority complex.
Kinda.
But we gonna kill everybody, kill everything, take what we want. We got the right, manifest destiny and all that other stuff.
If we didn't, it was a race riot and they were fighting back, so we had to kill them.
Yeah. Which perpetuates the lie.
Right.
Yeah, we're getting too excited.
So that
because we observe these things and even as we are discussing them, and this is a conversation, a discussion, a dialogue. Maybe I should say trialogue. Because we're trying to get other folks who are listening to spread that word, and inform us. I mean, This is from a little bit of the research and a little bit of the brain trust that we have and we share with each other, but we're interested in what you are thinking and saying. And that's why at the end of this, we're asking you to contact, the contact information that's given and give us your thoughts as well. And we'll do our best to be able to, put some of that on the next talk.
Yes. All right. So, this white citizen Declaration of Independence, that was a 800 group member a 800 group posse that went to the courthouse to go read this thing. That was on November 9th, the day after the election. The election was on the 8th. So this group, they demanded that, or they say that we, the citizens, do hereby declare that we will no longer be ruled and never ruled again by men of African origin. They demanded that black people lose their voting rights. They were demanding that black people's jobs be given to white men, and they demanded that Alexander Manley leave town within 24 hours under pain of death. The following day, Alfred Waddell, the same Confederate general that stirred the pot and led to all this, he led a mob of over 2,000 armed white men, and they went straight to Alex Manley's newspaper and they burned it to the ground. They then began laying waste to the black neighborhood, looting and burning businesses. Black people began coordinating and a light resistance was mounted on the corner of 4th and Hardnett when the black crowd from Walker's grocery store faced off with the group of white men from Brungy's saloon. A fight broke out. A shot was fired. Someone yelled, "White men killed!" All hell broke loose. Unarmed black men began scattering for cover. The fist fight quickly became a gunfight, which they were wholly unprepared for. The Wilmington Light Infantry and the White Government Union and the Red Shirts attacked black neighborhoods with rifles, revolvers, and a damn Gatling gun. In the midst of that's something that we also seen in the Hamburg massacre. Is the Red Shirts showed up with the Gatling gun to fight that black militia, which there was only like 6 people in the building.
Well, do you think our listeners know what a Gatling gun is?
If you don't, I'll explain it to you. Okay, go for it.
Real quick, because I just happened to see one just recently.
Nice.
You know, simply put, it's a hand crank machine gun. It's an automatic weapon. I don't know how many bullets, but they were big. They looked like a 50 cal, a hand crank 50 cal. You know what I mean? And it was a machine gun. You know and you may have seen them in some of the westerns, because you could put out a line of fire, you know, by just cranking this thing, and you cranking around and around and around. And then the other guy, you know, would take out the magazine, which was, you know, like 2 or 3 feet long. So I imagine there were 50 or more bullets in it, whatever caliber they happened to be. They look pretty damn big. You know what I mean? And they put in another one. And so 2 guys could lay out a line of fire, you know, which could suppress, tens and hundreds of people. And it gave, the blue coats, and it gave these people, superior fire. It did. You know.
Especially since the people that they were fighting against were unarmed.
Yeah.
And another quick little tidbit of information, the Gatling gun is the reason why handguns are called Gats. It's a shortened version of Gatling gun.
Yeah.
So in the midst of the gunfire, Alfred Waddell gathered every black official and imprisoned them, as well as the support that they had from the remaining white people. And I say remaining white people in the government because the propaganda campaign that led to this was actually really effective in fracturing the Fusion Party, leaving them vulnerable to exactly this kind of attack. The remaining Scallywag supporters were taken to the train station along with the previously arrested black officials and placed on the train and warned never to return. As the mob attacked and destroyed the black wealth structure in Wilmington, this all happened as the mob attacked and destroyed the black wealth structure in Wilmington itself. They targeted shops and homes of prominent members of the community, just like in the Ocoee Massacre, and so many other incidents that would later be written off as race riots. It's impossible to fully grasp the depth of the destruction. Most of the black community fled into the swamp to escape the violence, and ultimately many left the state. 100,000 of the 125,000 registered black voters moved within a week. The official death toll is 60, although some sources list up to 250. Some sources also report that they did in fact successfully choke off the river with bodies. If you listen to our very first episode about the California genocide, I discussed why I do not like or trust official numbers. Officially, the death toll is 16,000 for the California genocide, but the amount of people who disappeared was north of 170,000. Either way, it would be another 90 years before a black person held office in Wilmington, and that was Eva Clayton in 1992. This event would be written out of history after that, and that was the story of the only successful coup d'etat in U.S. history. Oh yeah, sorry. What happened to Alex Manly? And Alex Manly and his brother Frank quietly slipped out of town the night before the insurrection. He married Caroline Sadguar, and then the couple moved to Philadelphia, where Alex became involved in the Afro-American Newspaper Council, where he helped form the Armstrong Association. Now, the Armstrong Association is the predecessor to the Urban League. He also fought for black property rights in Wilmington and became the executive director at the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. He later moved to Alabama, where he worked as a professor at Tuskegee University. Now, Alex's wife, Caroline Swedger, was the daughter of a prominent black businessman, Frederick Swedger. They were half Cherokee, half black. So that's just an interesting tidbit of information about his wife. Now, just a few notes that I have to go. It's important to consider that the racist media campaign caused the breakdown in the unity of the Fusion Party. We kind of see something like that happening today. Wealthy white people manipulated poor white people into overlooking who their real enemy is. We also see that today. Politicians, law enforcement, and military personnel were involved. We see that today. It wasn't just poor white people whipped up into a frenzy, but the middle class of status for the most part that was involved in this, and we see a lot of that today. This was a response to change. We see that today. Keep in mind that Trump and the Trump era was little more than a response to the Obama era. So, who were some of the notable people who were arrested at the Capitol riots? Have you heard about any of the good ones?
I've heard reports of I think the FBI arresting up to 100 people.
Yeah, they got a lot of them. Did you hear about the 11 Molotov cocktails that they found?
Very vaguely. Like before I said, after a while I just said I'm not going to pay any attention to it. Because as far as I'm concerned, the big story for me is, they rile these people up and then they retreat back to their house. In Trump's case, the White House, because he didn't go to the Capitol.
No, he didn't.
See, punk.
I'll go there with you.
Yeah. And then they're going and he go back, see, so, that it sounds to me like that's what these folks were doing as well. It's all in the playbook, folks. It's all in the playbook.
Well, those 11 Molotov cocktails were brought there by a man named Lonnie Coleman, who was a 70-year-old man who was later found in his vehicle with an assault rifle, 2 handguns, a crossbow, a stun gun, and a bag of Camel smoke canisters.
Okay.
There was a 53-year-old man from the Atlanta suburbs, Christopher S. Georgia, a financial advisor who lived in Alpharetta. He pled not guilty on Thursday, but then on Saturday he was found with a hole in his chest, dead, committed suicide apparently.
Okay.
There was Aaron Mostofsky, who was the son of a Brooklyn judge.
I did hear about that one.
There were doctors, there were lawyers, there were lawmakers, there were at least
military men.
There were at least 30 cops. Yeah. There was an army officer who was just reprimanded for leading 100 troops there in plain clothes. I mean, if you want to, you can help with identifying these people. There's an excellent online resource called The Faces of the Riot that you can go to, and you'll see thousands of images of what the FBI calls the most photographed crime scene in the history of crime.
How smart were they?
And thankfully, none of those dummies wore masks.
How about that?
And that is all I have to say about the insurrection of 1898, Wilmington, Delaware.
Shall we call it failed coup?
No.
You think? What do you think?
That was a successful coup in 1898. The one that's...
no, I'm talking about this one.
I don't want to call it failed because I think it's ongoing.
Okay.
I think it's ongoing. I don't think it's over.
Yeah, I agree with you, and that's why I think I'm not feeling to really talk about it that much because I think it's ongoing. That's exactly the reason why. And I've thought about it quite a bit. And in coming here, I thought about it a lot too. I guess that gives me a certain bias, as to, got to move on, but I'm glad that you gave us a lot of meat to chew on, and draw the parallel as you've done, before. Dr. Joy's book certainly did that, We got to kind of know about these things as they've happened. And when they do, the intelligent person, the reasonable person, we're like, I keep that in mind. It's like when grandmama tell you don't touch the fire,
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Or like you riding your bicycle, don't ride your bike down the hill.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the elders frequently, because they've lived through things. And I'm saying this as an elder to my brothers who are in Black Lives Matter. You're standing in front of the beast. You see, I've certainly done it, and now it's your turn, but you got to be prepared for what the beast might do.
Agreed.
You see, and I believe that, what Uncommon said, gives you a good example. I'm going to stop there because I don't side on, like the dark side. You know what I mean?
No, save that for me.
yeah. But I'm glad you do it, and you do it quite well. I'm always impressed. I don't have the time to do all the research that I want to do, because other things are going on. But I'm glad you did, and you brought that to our attention. But I also want to mention, me being on the other side is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said that this brother moved to Philadelphia, and he did what?
Yeah, he started a bunch of stuff. He opened his own bank.
Boom.
He started what was the predecessor to the Urban
League. Boom.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the thing that
no, unfortunate.
No, I have to give this.
Okay.
Because he never really fully recovered from losing his paper.
How could he?
He never fully recovered from that. And while he did end up finally opening his own bank, while he was doing a lot of this stuff, he was part of this, writers union and whatnot.
Yes.
He was also working as a painter.
I'm gonna emphasize, just like if you don't already know, for good or bad, and I truly do have some personal experiences that I will not talk about, but I had an opportunity to rub shoulders, with some people that were in leadership positions, in the Urban League and the NAACP.
Nice.
So I mean, it's like person to person stuff, but I'm urging all of our listeners to look at what they have done that was constructive and positive. For example, this boy had a bank. What do banks do? You answer the question, folks. The Urban League. Oh, okay. What did the Urban League do? You answer that question too. And you can see how, in spite of him not recovering fully from the loss, it's looked like how it all got turned in a different direction, and look at the benefit of that. You see what I'm saying? So who really won? Who made the gain? Who benefited, from this riot, this insurrection, this coup d'etat, that was meant to stop these black folks from doing their stuff.
Right.
You see?
And something that I'm sorry, I probably should have mentioned immediately after following the coup, once they grabbed all the officials and they moved them all out and shipped them off, they instantly installed their own government.
I know they did.
They instantly installed
naturally.
So you said who benefited, and that made me think like, I probably should have said that.
Yeah.
So
it's an interesting thing that as you begin to understand these and you research them and you how they say, you chasing rabbits, down the rabbit hole, you'd be surprised what you come up with. There's a lot of history that is not talked about for most of us. It's in school. I personally think you should find it suspicious. I told a story about how when I told my 5th grade, teacher, well, how come when the blue coats, kill the women and children, the Indian women and children, it's victory, know, but then when the women, the Indians kill the white women and children, it's a massacre. As a 5th grader in school, I couldn't understand that. And that's one of my earliest memories of like, wait, there's something inconsistent about this mess.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I'm asking people to use your own good common sense as you begin to amass this knowledge and this information. Use it appropriately for the benefit of yourself and your family and your community, and your people.
I agree. And let's leave it on that. We're going to get out of here, but before we do, you got any parting words for the peoples?
I want folks to, since you asked, I want folks to contact us. I want to get the feedback. I want to see what struck you, what you like, what you didn't like. If you have actually gone out and done some research and you can add to the store of knowledge that we've tried to put together, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time. We got family lives to live and all that. We're going through this COVID thing and all that. We're trying to prepare for the future. COVID ain't taking us down, and so we're using the time where things have slowed down a little bit to be able to fill it in with other good things that can grow for the future, and this is one of the things that we are doing even still. And so if you have time, pick out whatever interests you, maybe bounce off something that I said or Uncommon said, and write back to us at the contact information that he's going to give you. You can contact me care of that same contact information, and I will get it. And give us some of the feedback, talk it over with your family, the old people particularly, also with the young people, try to bring it up to date with, what you're seeing on TV, what you're hearing on the radio, maybe even the movies that you're seeing, because I'm seeing a lot of movies having black themes to them. And I can remember when there weren't too many of them other than, Superfly and, the black exploitation movies, as they call it in the film industry. I can think back to, there weren't a whole lot of black, athletes. I could think back when with Tommy and his boys, raised their right fist at the Olympics, and they were, basically blacklisted. Oh, speaking about blacklisted, Paul Robeson got blacklisted. Josephine Baker got blacklisted. Right. Because they were saying stuff. I could think of other names too. Yeah. But the idea is that
Josephine Baker.
These people speaking up, and then you can't work anymore. That's the reason why many black artists ended up going to Europe and were able to achieve their fame over there, and by force of popular demand, they were brought back.
It's also the reason why many black entertainers keep their mouth shut when there's things going on.
Can't blame them.
Can't.
But still, we got some that are saying some stuff.
Yeah.
Today was, football day. You know what I mean? We can think of some football players, a
lot of them.
Yeah. The basketball players, a lot of names, who they are, because they made it very clear. They got the funds, they got the money, they got the voice, they got the influence, and some of them are stepping up. You got a lot of other, celebrity type folks that got some fame to them. They got a name. They're saying things as best they can. I'm not faulting nobody. We got other people that are not famous that are still standing up to all this mess. Yeah. The mothers and the fathers, the uncles and the grandmas and grandpas, the teachers, people that are plumbers, people that are working as workers, like office workers, janitorial workers, right. The dentists, the bus drivers, we got black folks all over the country that are standing up and saying what there needs to be said. And for many of us, at least we can vote relatively safely, safely, but now we got to be careful about where we spend our money as well. So be informed, make your decisions, and live the appropriate life.
I agree. And on that, I'm gonna give you the places where you can reach us. First off, I want to say this is going to be my first week doing this. I'm going to be live on TikTok. This episode will release on Wednesday. I'll be live Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific time. So look out for that. You can. This will also be our first episode on Spotify. Yeah, we're reaching out. We're branching out to new platforms, so we're no longer only on YouTube. We'll be on Spotify as of this week. And if you want to reach out to me, you can reach me at Creating Black Readers on Instagram. I'm at Black Men's Book Club on TikTok, or you can look for Uncommon Sense. Or if you want to do the good old fashioned email thing, you can email me at wellreadblackmen@gmail.com. Once again, that is wellreadblackmen@gmail.com. This has been the Black Men's Book Club. We are glad that you're back here with us. We're going to be back here with you again in a few days, and signing out.
Signing out.
Peace.
Peace.
Ma'am, what happened to you?
I got maced.
You got maced. And what happened? You were trying to go inside the Capitol?
I made it like a foot inside, and they pushed me out, and they maced me.
What's your name? Where are you from?
My name is Elizabeth. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee.
And why did you want to go in?
We're storming the Capitol. It's a revolution.